My grandfather's name was Dominic Lazzaro. Born in Hell's Kitchen, he grew up in Peekskill, New York. When he was 20, he gave up his dream to be a golfer and became a teacher. At 26, he was drafted out of the classroom and into the Army Air Corps. As a navigator aboard a B-17 bomber, he saw a lot more of France than he would have liked. Those who knew him said that he returned from the war a changed man. In 1983, my grandfather dictated his war experience to audio tape while he was deathly ill. He died the following year at the age of 69. Survived by his 4 children and wife, half of his grandchildren would be born after his death. In the winter of 1994, the pilot of my grandfather's B-17, a man named Hank Berman, sent a letter to my grandmother. Hank had made an unexpected discovery.
Everybody in the house asked him to do something for a record of his experiences for themselves and also for grandchildren. And a half hour before he died, he said to Jean, "You have my memoirs." That was the last thing he said.
On February 16, 1943, I was shot down over Saint Nazaire, France. I hope that it will be interesting for you people to listen to it. It's not great, but it's something.
Well, they were flying their 10th mission, which I have come to understand now was 2 missions longer than the average life expectancy of a B-17 bomber squad during World War II. So they had beaten the odds, so to speak. Hank Berman was the pilot of the B-17 that my dad was flying with on that day. Actually, he was his pilot for all the missions.
This was a 10th raid for me, and the 4th time we had bombed the submarine pens in Saint Nazaire. We left our base at Shelveston, England, early in the morning and rendezvoused with other planes at Land's End. We were attacked immediately by fighters after dropping the bombs. Fighters made 2 passes at us, and on the second pass, which came from 1 o'clock, the engine on the right side of the plane inboard was hit. At that point, I worked very hard to open the escape hatch. It came off with some difficulty, and I looked down at the ground, which was about 16,000 feet away. I just couldn't jump at that time, but suddenly the plane turned over and threw me back. Now, instead of dropping out of the plane, I had to struggle to get up and pull myself up to get out. Luckily, I was able to pull myself up through the door and out of the plane.
He saw the plane go down, didn't see any other parachutes, and he assumed everyone else had died. When he landed, he was on the French countryside and was taken in by the underground. That was the way he always expressed it.
Not too far away, I saw a farmhouse. I went into the house, in which there were 2 old women. They knew immediately who I was, and I told them that I wanted to change clothes. I tried to tell her in my poor high school French what had happened to me. She accepted the fact that I was escaping and indicated she would help.
Apparently the woman who lived in the home gave him her husband's wedding suit to wear, and I imagine that in exchange for the clothing, he had to get rid of any of his possessions that would indicate he was an American aviator.
You know, my understanding is at that point, he gave the family his New Paltz college ring and his compass that he had in exchange for the clothing and the food that they gave him.
He had cigarettes and he had some money, French money, that they'd given them in case they did get shot down, and which he gave to them. But he said it was a pitiful amount for what they did for him.
The goal with the French underground was to meet with the French underground, to be brought into that system, to be able to be moved. So the people he was staying with had to make contact with the French underground so that in fact he could begin being processed or moved from where they were toward the Pyrenees. The idea was to get across the Pyrenees into Spain, where then they could easily be reunited with their unit and gotten across the channel to England. So contact had to be made for that purpose. Somewhere along the line, he was brought together with a group of other POWs who were also being moved by the French underground, and they were taken to a location to wait. And it was at that point when they were arrested by the Gestapo. Apparently, one of the French underground agents was in fact working for the Germans at the same time. Well, he was in the POW camp 2.5 years. 6 months of that time he was in solitary confinement. That's hard for me to even imagine.
Well, there came a time in September when we were asked if we wanted to be transferred to the American camp, South Camp. And so I was one who was taken to the South Camp. And as I approached the gate, there, big as life, was Hank Berman. Well, I said to him, "I thought you were dead." And he said the same thing to me. You could hear the guns firing, the rumbling. You put your ear down to the ground, hear the ground shaking, vibrating. Tanks, I guess, and large vehicles. And finally, one bright morning, I could hear some firing. I remember running to a slit trench. I figured I'd gone all this time. I wasn't about to get hit by a stray bullet. There was a church steeple you could see in the distance from our camp. And suddenly there was an American flag flying there. And I thought, by God, the war is over for us at this time. General Patton himself came in. And he questioned us about the conditions and so on. But actually, General Patton cried because it was so bad and it affected him. So he was a good man. I can remember going into New York Harbor, and when I saw that Statue of Liberty, I think I cried.
They kept in touch all the time. It was Anna Lane who said to me when Dom died, maybe you should try to contact the pilot and see if that he would want to know that Dom died. And when I did, he immediately came. And he came over to the to Clark's, to the funeral services, and was approached by many of Dom's friends down there to tell the story again, because they had heard it and they knew it, and he was like somebody that they knew.
Hank Berman has come full circle. 50 years after his B-17 bomber went down over France, he's returned to the crash site to retrace his steps and remember his 8 crewmates who died.
And I never realized that. I don't know. Of course, I always said I was very, very lucky to come out of that crash alive, but I never got the sense that the French people felt that it was such a miracle.
Apparently for the people in the town, it's one of the more important historical events in their village. So they had quite a bit of coverage. So Hank went overseas to France, was part of the ceremony, and at the time the monument was dedicated to the flyers, he was presented with the ring.
Someone came up to him with a ring and a compass that had been given, to them by their parents. And because my father's initials were in the ring, Hank Berman immediately knew it belonged to him.
One of Hank's first items of business, contacting the Lazzaro family in New York.
Said that I have something I want to give you, but it's so precious, a memento, that I really want to make a personal contact with you.
And so Hank came back called us and said he had the ring and the compass, and he would box it up and send it to me if I wanted him to, but he would very much like to return it personally.
I went down with my son Brian, with my brother Bill, and his son Scott, and we met Hank there outside Hank's home, and he handed us the ring.
And what Hank Berman did for my own children, but mostly for his grandchildren, was to keep Dom alive. For most of them, the only way they know him is through these war experiences, because they were all very, very young when he died.